Hello, hello. I'm Jamie, and this is my good friend Amanda, and we're going to talk to you today about how to stay cool during an audit. So before we kick off, I want to do a little brief introduction so you know what we're all about. So actually, first I'm going to pass it off to Amanda to introduce herself, and then we'll come on over to me.
Oh, gee, thanks, Jamie. My name is Amanda. I'm also known as the Tax Chick. I am a tax lawyer practicing in Saskatoon and Saskatchewan in Canada. And I have a blog and I have a podcast all about tax. And they're actually really fun to listen to and to read because tax is fun. And that's how I met Jamie, because Jamie thinks tax is fun too. So back to you, Jamie.
You have to listen to her podcast. Like you'll see her personality today and how she explains things, and then you'll completely understand. But I'm so happy to have her here because we're in Toronto. Woo! And she's visiting and doing big things in the city. And so I feel so grateful that you got to come here and make a visit. And now we can make some fun content for everybody. So my name's Jamie. If you're not already friends with me or connected with me, and I'm a CPA, and I specialize in teaching self-employed people how to manage their bookkeeping in QuickBooks. And I also coach and mentor accountants to do the same for their clients. And because I love education, and I feel like there needs to be so much more education in this space. And she's like, preach. Yes. So, and that's why we're bringing to you today how to stay cool in an audit. We want to teach you all of the things. And so the first thing I wanted to share is really, I was hoping that you could tell us what a tax lawyer is.
Oh, sure. I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding about what a tax lawyer does and how a tax lawyer is different perhaps from a tax accountant. I think that's often the biggest distinguishing factor. I think I have a blog post about this somewhere, but I can't remember when I would have done it. But I mean, a lawyer that practices in tax can actually do very different things. So I might be very different than another tax lawyer down the street. The type of practice I have is I help small businesses. So I'm not just doing tax plans every day. I'm helping business owners through their day-to-day, which might include helping them with an audit. It might include helping them with succession planning for their business. And I happen to know a lot of stuff about tax. So when I'm helping you through those things, I can also explain to you the tax consequences of what you're doing. Other tax lawyers will be very specialized. So especially in some of the larger firms, you'll see tax lawyers that are just solely doing planning. So they're taking all of your corporations and your partnerships, and they're planning how to reorganize them and mix them all around to give you an optimal tax situation. Some other lawyers will just do tax litigation. So all they'll do is help with audits and appeals to Tax Court of Canada. So there can be a very varied role of a tax lawyer, but very different than an accountant. I'm not doing the calculations. I don't like math. And so that's why I picked tax lawyer, not tax accountant. So I'm not doing the calculations. I can, but I don't really want to.
Okay.
I'm doing more of the advocacy, more of the contract drafting, the law drafting, and helping you kind of work through the decision making to get to the end result.
Okay, this is beautiful because I feel like there's so many times where people go to an accountant, and the accountant's like, you need to talk to your lawyer, and then the lawyer's like, you need to talk to your accountant. And it seems like what you have is like a high level view of the full picture. So you're not doing number crunching because you don't need to do that.
That's
but
right.
You're able to do the strategy and provide like a combined strategy.
That's right. And I'm a collaborative practitioner in that when I work with my clients, it's important to me that I work with their accountant too, because there's nothing that drives me crazier as a person that also receives services. If I go to my accountant, they're like, go see your lawyer, and you go to your lawyer and they say, go see your accountant, and you're like, I don't even know what my question is anymore. So I think bring everybody in a room together. Everybody's there. You ask your questions. We all feed off each other. It's way cheaper and it's way easier for everybody. So I like working with other disciplines.
Beautiful. We love the collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. And so really what we truly want to talk today about was like how to stay cool. But I guess
because we think we're cool.
We think we're cool. We'll get into how to stay cool in an audit. So
we have the legit training for that. Yeah. We have the letters. Yeah.
So the first thing is a term that is new to me as well, and it's what is a book and record?
So I think when you think about starting an audit, I mean, an audit is Canada Revenue Agency, and a member of Canada Revenue Agency phones you, or sends you a letter. They will not text you. So if you get a text, it's a scam.
Okay.
They typically won't email you. You might get an email notification that says there's a new piece of mail for you in your online CRA account, but you're not going to get a direct email from Canada Revenue Agency. So they actually do still pick up the phone. I find quite a bit. I don't know if you're noticing that.
I mean, I don't get a lot of that. I don't have a lot of clients like that I'm representing.
Because your clients have their books in order. That's why.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. That's the end of our session. Get your books in order. Okay. Anyway.
So often they'll phone now, and I'm finding, especially because a lot of the CRA auditors are working from home, and so just the logistics of getting a letter approved and having it sent out is a lot, right? So they'll pick up the phone and they'll say, "Hi, I'm Jane Smith. I'm an auditor from CRA," and your initial reaction might be, "Whoa, is this a scam?"
Yeah.
Because I think it's good to have an initial reaction. So if you have an initial reaction, here's what you do. You ask for their agent ID, and they'll give you a string of numbers and a couple letters, and they'll give you usually like a first initial and a last name. And then you say, "I'm just going to phone back to CRA's main line and double check." And they will, if they're legit, they will say, "Not a problem." And then you go and you phone through the general inquiries line. And if you're an individual, you can phone the personal line. If you're a business, you phone the business line. Say, "Hi, this person just phoned me. This is their name.
It's really annoying.
Yeah. Is this legit? Because they want a bunch of stuff from me." And the person will say yes or no. And then once you know it's okay, you can phone them back. And they're probably going to start by asking you for your books and records, which is what's making us start with this particular section of the discussion. And so what the heck is a book and record? Because nobody really talks like that in real life. It's only in the Income Tax Act that it talks like that. And so there is an actual phrase in the Income Tax Act that talks about a book and record.
Okay.
And that phrase and those words have been continually expanded over time, to the point that almost everything is a book and record. So for example, there's been case law recently where like metadata is a book and record. So like previous versions of planning memos or previous versions of documents can be included in a book and record. It can be that expansive.
So planning memos in the
corporate reorganization context.
Okay.
So if your lawyer or your accountant, more like if it's your accountant, has prepared sort of an initial memo saying, "I think here's the steps that we're going to take to get you from point A to point Z." And then maybe we change those steps a little bit. So there might be like a version 1, a version 2, a version 3. Well, guess what? They can ask for version 1. They can see all the different iterations of what you've asked for. There was a pretty major case a couple of years ago that allowed that. And with all of your records being electronic now, and I mean, you do all your bookkeeping in the cloud. I mean, this is a thing that people do. Now what happens is instead of going and like printing out your general ledger or printing out your stuff and then dropping a box off at CRA, now what you're doing is you're uploading everything electronically, or sometimes even scarier, you're allowing a CRA officer to come to your place of business and like plug into your computer and access it right on QuickBooks or access it right on your system.
Wow.
Which for many people is terrifying because you're just like giving CRA access to your computer. I've always suggested to clients, if you can export, because we'll talk a little bit later about sort of the scope of the audit and kind of what you want to give. But if you can export exactly what they're looking for in a format that's acceptable to them, then you control what they have access to.
Yes.
But as a starting point, a book and record
is a very
exactly like you can't just PDF everything. They sometimes want an active live bookkeeping document because they have some sort of computer equipment, and this is past my pay grade, that apparently can go into your bookkeeping software and can do some searches for them. So as opposed to them manually having to go through, they can plug in certain parameters, the system can go through and check. And so then when you're getting questions, those questions are very directed. So it's like, here's this expense line. Like they're doing those kind of like they're just pulling random versus before where you used to have to provide proof for everything. Now their system's going, here's 10 random things. Provide the proof for those 10 random things.
Okay.
So there is actually an advantage to being able to give them an exported version of your bookkeeping software, because you usually end up having to give less documentation.
Because they have less fingers in there, so they're
And they also like come into it and they're not quite as ticked off at you if you haven't been like obstinate about it. So then I find usually it gets you a bit quicker to where you need to go. So book and record is very broad. But the one thing you want to remember when you're thinking about what a book and record is there is a group of documents or pieces of information that you don't want to provide, and that's privileged documents. So you might have heard this concept of privilege. I mean, sometimes it pops up in the news, solicitor client privilege in particular. So if your lawyer has emailed you, and in that email they've given you legal advice, that email is privileged and other people aren't allowed to see it.
Okay.
Similarly, if your lawyer writes your planning memo saying, here's all the steps that we're going to take to get you from A to Z, arguably that planning memo is privileged.
Okay.
If your lawyer sends you a bill, which we do, and in the bill, they have descriptors saying, here's the things I did. I researched these sections. I gave you advice on these things. Well, you don't just want to hand over that bill because that bill is privileged. So you might want to black out the descriptors. So if you're trying to prove like a professional expense invoice, so you're trying to justify that,
like
right?
Okay.
And so you think, well, how do I prove it if I if I can't give it? Well, you can give it. You just have to redact the descriptors, and you indicate that you're redacting them because they're privileged. You black them out because they're privileged. So it's important to kind of keep this concept of privilege in mind, because once you take privilege and you kind of like hand it out, you can't get it back. It's like letting out air from a balloon, like it's out. You can't gather it up and put it back in the balloon again. And so it is really important to have that consideration in mind. And it's important that if you've given privileged information to your accountant or to your bookkeeper, that they're keeping that documentation separate, because you don't want them inadvertently releasing something as well. And there's also certain states where you can have, if a lawyer has sent something to an accountant and the accountant is working on it for you, because you're saying, I don't understand this stuff. Can you guys just talk to each other and figure this out? So if your accountant is like your agent in that situation, well, that communication might be privileged as well.
Between the accountant and the lawyer. I see.
So it's very important. And this is sometimes one of those times where you say, well, when would you want to hire a tax lawyer? Well, if you're in an audit, and if your audit is of something that's maybe a really major transaction that you didn't really understand to begin with, but your lawyer and your accountant helped you with it, this is sometimes a great time to retain your lawyer on even like a consultation basis. Here's the initial letter. Here's what they're asking for. What do I need to be worried about? They don't need to make the submission for you.
I see.
But they can help you comb through the initial stuff and tell you how to say it. Because if you are redacting things for privilege or pulling things out for privilege, like you have to tell the government that you're doing that.
And does it look shady?
No.
Okay.
They totally expect it. Privilege is to be expected.
Okay.
They will sometimes push back and ask for details on what the document is, and that's fine.
Okay.
But this is a great time to start engaging a lawyer.
Yeah.
Because you want to make sure you're providing the right stuff in the front end. Now, most audits, we're not going to have that problem. Most audits are just your generic, they're phoning you up, they're asking for proof of these expenses. They're asking for, proof that you actually have these employees, here's what they did. It's nothing huge. It's more innocuous. Those ones you can handle them yourself, and we'll talk about some of the rules going forward.
So those are like the basic bookkeeping, like basic,
like the bread and butter ones.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, kind of like the check ones, right?
Yeah.
That usually don't go anywhere. But if you've bought or sold a business,
okay,
or if you've done a major restructuring of your business, and all of a sudden CRA comes in and says, we want to do an audit for the year that happened, hire someone.
Yeah, I'm like, you got to call somebody because
Well, you're gonna call, like, you're gonna go faster and call a tax lawyer. You need to make sure. You just need to make sure that the information you're providing at the front end is correct, because that information will haunt you throughout the audit, throughout the tax appeal. And if you phone me 5 years later, like, I can't undo what you gave them.
it's the balloon analogy is really good.
Okay.
And also it kind of reminds me of when they're talking about like in TV, if you're watching, like, if you like watching like court dramas and stuff like that, where it's like somebody can be innocent, but they still really need to get a lawyer because they could say something that basically messes up the case.
Right.
But it's not that you did something wrong, it's that you don't know how to communicate and what to give and what not to give.
Exactly.
So yeah.
And you may end up deciding to give the privileged information later. Like, and maybe it doesn't make a difference, but you kind of need to sit there and go through that analysis so that you know the reasons why you're giving it. That's the key.
I love it. And I also think like the less information you give, the better, because it's like less things to poke around at. Because we just don't want more questions, and then it's more work for us to gather data and information. So yeah, I really love that. Okay, so let's talk about, so we're asking, you know, CRA is coming, they're asking us for information. We maybe have our tax lawyer because we're like, this is a complex situation, or maybe we're doing it ourselves, but how do we control the movement of information back and forth?
So I think it's really important as a starting point to remember that, you know, Canada Revenue Agency is allowed to audit you. An audit does not mean you've done something criminally bad. It's kind of like when you're in an airport and you go through security, and I just went through an airport this morning, so like this is on my mind, and like everybody has to go through the security because it's just what you do to keep the system running smoothly. But it doesn't mean that I've done something bad and that's why I'm walking through security. And like I happened to get pulled for extra screening this morning, so I went in the fancy little cubicle thing and whatever. But it wasn't because I was a bad person. I don't think, at least it was just because I got randomly selected. Think about an audit as like being randomly selected for security, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what it is that, I mean, this is a self-assessing tax system. So it's up to you to file your taxes and file them properly. And so the only way Canada Revenue Agency can double check that is if they audit you. That's the idea.
Okay.
So when you get an audit letter or you get a phone call, you really have to take that deep breath and go, okay, I'm not a bad person. They're just checking to make sure the system works. And I think that's a very important starting place, because we often move into panic. And I mean, I do this for a living. I still kind of have a little flutter when I get the brown envelope in the mail, because you're like, oh no, what did I do? Probably nothing, right? But it's a self-assessing system. So start there. But it's very important that you give just the information that you're being asked to give. So you had mentioned earlier, you know, don't throw a whole bunch of documents at them. It's annoying for the auditor too, because if they've asked for something specific, like don't go give them the moon when they don't need that.
Yes.
They will usually give you something in writing that says this is what we need. If they don't, ask for it. Because sometimes they'll just say it on the phone and you'll be like, you're taking notes and you're furiously writing and you don't know what they're asking. You can say, would you be able to provide me with this by letter? They will always say yes. They'll say no problem. And then if you get that letter and you look at the listing and you don't know what something is, pick up the phone and call the auditor. I'm looking at your letter. I'm really confused. I don't know what this is.
That's not, and I think that people are scared to do that because they feel like it's making them look like they're doing something wrong, or like they don't. And the truth is, and I feel like this is similar in the realm of even just asking questions come tax time. Like if you're not sure about something, you can call the CRA and ask them, and it's not going to like put you on the naughty list or something. Right? Like it's like not. So don't be scared to ask the auditor questions. Absolutely. And don't be scared to call CRA business inquiries and ask them questions, because I think that's something with the self-assessing system is they have to have resources for you. They don't assume that everybody has an Amanda in their lives, you know, like it's
and not everybody should have to pay for a tax lawyer in their lives, right? I mean, it's not necessary. So communication is so key when working with CRA and having clear communication. And I found in the past, it's like I can submit the exact same documents that the client submitted or maybe one of their advisors submitted, and I have success and they don't. But it's the exact same documents, but it's the way that you submit them.
Okay. And
so I think communication is important. And sometimes when you've been submitting the same documentation over and over again and you're getting like the same results, that's another, cue to pick up the phone and say, I feel like I'm missing something. Because here's what I'm giving you. Is there something you're looking for that I'm not giving you? And I've had success sometimes doing that, where they said, well, we looked at your documents and you didn't have X. And then I would say, but you didn't ask me for X. Oh, well, we just thought it was implied. No, that was not implied. I can send you X. Does that fix it? Yes, great. and we all move on versus having it perceived. So really make sure you understand each line item. Are they asking for something privileged? Because that's a separate issue. And then do you understand what they're asking for? And then they're going to audit you for a specific period of time. And as we know, CRA is not allowed to go back to forever and ever and ever, unless they have some justification. So typically it's 3 years for income tax, 4 years for GST from the date of your reassessment or your assessment. And then if they want to go back further than that, they have to show that you misrepresented or you did something bad, not criminally bad, but bad. And so you want to look at the time frame. Like, when are they asking you for stuff? So if they're asking you for stuff from 2020 and 2021, well, don't give them 2019.
Yeah,
they didn't ask for it.
They didn't ask. Don't give them more stuff.
Yeah, just give them what they asked for. And I'm not saying to be evasive, nor are you, but just give them what they asked for.
Yeah.
And then make sure you have some sort of central control place. So for example, if there's 3 people in your organization that are helping with the audit, make one person your person. And that's the person that's your spokesperson. And they're the ones speaking to CRA. And they're the ones that are making the submissions, because then you have consistency. It's not just that, oh, well, Fred's talking today and Frank's talking tomorrow.
Yeah.
It should be one person, and that person should be knowledgeable about what's happening in the business.
Yes.
So I think that's a really important thing too.
Yeah, I think having that clean funnel of information coming from one person, I find just in general,
Totally.
working with businesses, it's like you got to have the one person leading the charge on the project, whatever the project is. If it's the audit or if it's you're working on something new in your business, someone's got to be the one that's always there in the meetings. That's making sure everything is gathered that was asked for. So yeah, and I feel like the communication part I had experienced once. So I don't do a lot of work with client, like advisory work. So, but when I used to, I had a client that was audited for HST, and oftentimes that's a place that, I don't know if you see, it's like a lot of mistakes get made.
Yeah.
Tis what it is.
Yeah.
And especially in the online space, it's like really hard to charge the rate unless you're paying for like a proper cart software, which not everybody does at the beginning. And so if you're billing people outside of Canada and you're not billing them HST or GST, then you need to make sure that you get their address and you can prove that they don't live in Canada. So I had a client who was an online business owner selling courses everywhere. And what happened was they sold to a lot of places in the US. And when you're selling like small courses and there's like high volume, and they're asking you for addresses of every single person, it's a pain. So with that, we provided like records of from their sales software that they were selling through to show where the locations of like the credit cards were. But that they were like, no. They're like, this is not good enough, right? They want proof. So then they said, we need you to go back to every single client. Right?
It's like asking you to recreate a mileage log. It's just a bad scene.
Like, no, we're not doing that. Like, and this is the communication part, I think, as well, where the truth is like also they're going to ask and they're going to push for whatever they want, because it's also going to make their job easier. And that's also, I think, another reason maybe why you were suggesting don't give them a bunch of stuff, because also that's stuff that they have to look at.
That's right.
So it's like you're making them more work for them. And like, obviously they're going to want their job to be as easy as possible, but sometimes you have to push back and know, especially when you know that, you understand what they're asking for, then it's a lot easier to say like, come on, man. Give me a break here. You know the reality of the situation here. I'll give you the top 3 clients, whatever. The rest, leave us alone. Like that type of thing. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, and sometimes you can promise to change your practice in the future. And I've seen that happen a lot too, where you say, okay, here's the reality. I don't have the detailed addresses for these 200 people that bought my course. What I do have is their credit card information, which I can identify their locations. In the future, if this is what's going to be required, let's work together to figure out what practice I have to put in place. Now, when you do that, oftentimes what will happen is that CRA will come in and check on you like 2 years down the road, and they'll say, you promised this. They have a little tickler system, and they'll come back in and they'll tickle you 2 years later, and you better follow through and done what you said. But that's also sometimes helpful, because you kind of go, okay, fine, I didn't do what I was supposed to, but I promise, I pinky swear, I'm going to do it better next time. And you can kind of usually get a jail-free card, I find, usually,
Yeah.
that way.
Because in that situation too, like, I think it's like in certain situations, I feel like they understand the like, that they don't suspect that you actually didn't charge the right rate.
No, exactly.
So that's,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that it's like they're not sensing tax avoidance in
Yes.
that situation. So yeah, they're not trying to send you to jail, but
Exactly.
yeah, this stuff can freak people out, and asking questions and communicating a lot sounds like it's a part of the strategy.
Absolutely.
Of staying cool.
Absolutely. That's right.
Ask all the questions.
Well, knowledge is power.
Yes.
Right. I think you and I both believe that. And I think
Mhm.
that when you're uncertain about something, that creates fear and that creates panic. And then you respond in a way that's not helpful.
Yes.
So if you just ask the question and you know what's going on, you're going to respond in a much more directed way and probably have a better result.
I love it. Love it. So what happens at the end of an audit?
That's a really good question, because I feel like we talk a lot about audits on blogs and podcasts, but we don't often talk about what happens at the end, because there can be many different things that can happen at the end of an audit.
You crack open a bottle of wine and you
Well, and ironically, I have a set of clients who had wine made specifically for when their tax court matter was done, and they provided me with a bottle and we drank together. I don't even really drink wine, but we had a little celebration that we were successful at the end.
I love it.
There's a number of different ways that it can go down. I mean, the one way that it can go down, which is the way we all hope for, is they look at all your stuff and they say, wow, you must have hired Jamie, because like you got it going on. Everything is correct. You have all your documentation. Thank you for your time. No changes. Life is great. And then really all you're out is your time and your emotional, anguish from having to deal with the audit. So that is option one. And many audits go that way, right? We often don't think about that, but there's tons of audits that just end and it's fine. The other way an audit can go is kind of the other extreme, where they find something, and maybe it's something big, and they come back to you and they give you a letter, and we refer to it as a proposal letter internally, because it proposes the change to your income tax or your excise tax acts, right? And so it'll say, we've looked through your stuff, here's what we're proposing. Maybe it'll say that they're proposing penalties. So I mean civil penalties, which are called often gross negligence penalties or failure to file penalties. They are not jail penalties. They're just like, you were bad, so we're slapping you in the wrist penalties. They're fines. It's like getting a parking ticket, right? So they might propose that, and they usually give you a period of time to respond. So they're usually giving you like 30 days. You can sometimes get an extension. And if you're not able to convince them otherwise, then it will result in a reassessment. You'll get a document that says notice of reassessment. Tax will be owing. If there's penalties, they're going to apply them. They're going to apply interest. And at that point, you now have a clock that's ticking, because if you still disagree with what's in that document, you have 90 days to file an objection, which is like an appeal. You can do this yourself. You can file it online. CRA has a form. It's pretty user friendly. Once you file that objection, one of the big positives is that collection stops hounding you. So sometimes we file an objection because we need to buy some time, because you don't have the cash. You want to pay it, but you don't have the cash right now. So you buy some time by filing an objection, then you can always pull it if you decide later that you don't need to pursue it. But the interest will keep accruing. And the interest rate is way worse than going to the bank. So, I mean, it's not like, don't get a loan from CRA. It's not a good plan. But that's one of the routes. And then you start going through the internal appeal route. The other option is actually the one I find happens most often. It's a hybrid of the two, where they've looked at your documents and maybe they found like 3 things, and they're not big things. They're like, oops, you forgot this expense or that expense, or we're going to recategorize. Or I see a lot of like people claim 100% of their meals instead of 50% of the cost of a meal. And so they'll come back to you and you'll go, yeah, that was like wrong. Okay, I can accept that. You'll get a reassessment and you just pay it and you move on. But we do need to remember that sometimes audits just go through squeaky clean and free.
Yeah.
You walk out and you have no changes.
That is the ideal situation.
It is the ideal situation.
And in that example with the meals and entertainment, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're paying in that, so say you made a mistake and you claimed 100% of your meals when you should only claim 50%, because that's the rule. And what they would be billing you for if they reassessed you would be the difference in tax that the tax that you should have paid, because you got 100% the write-off, you should have only got 50. So that 50% is basically going back on to your tax bill. You're gonna pay the tax on that, plus interest for however long ago you should have paid that tax. And then is there penalties? I think
It depends.
right?
Depends. If it's not your first offense, like if this is the second audit and you pulled the same crap before,
Or like, you liar.
they're gonna come back and say, we already warned you about this, you pinky promised, and you didn't listen.
Yeah.
And then they're gonna assess penalties. And I mean, gross negligence penalties, there's like a formula, but it's either greater of, I think it's like $500 or 50% of the unreported tax. So it's
Okay.
always usually 50% of the unreported tax.
Okay.
So then on top of the amount that you just talked about them adding in, you take 50% of that on top of that, and that would be your penalty.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I feel like if you were I got audited, they'd be like, you liar, you know better. They would.
I have no
That's so
defense.
deep.
I
I
have
don't
no
know. I just teach everybody else to do this, but I don't know. That's why my books have to be like extra squeaky.
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, no, I think that I think that's it's good to keep in mind that notice of a reassessment, because I think that that's something that confuses a lot of
It does,
people.
yeah.
And it's kind of like, I like to think of it as like well, you didn't tell us otherwise, so we just decided to go with what we have. That's what it kind of is. Like,
It's true.
it's like, warning, we're gonna change this because we found this, and this. And then if you don't tell them anything otherwise, they're like, okay, we gave you the warning, so now we're just gonna assume what we thought is the truth and move on with our lives, and this is what you owe. So notice of reassessment doesn't always happen in an audit, because it could be a review, it could be like, it doesn't have to be, like, people get reassessed all the time. But yeah, it's kind of like, well, we went with the information we had, so
Exactly.
and you didn't tell us otherwise, so.
Well, and I've sometimes had clients say, I don't know if I've been reassessed, because you get all this mail, right? And sometimes you'll get the interest calculation, and you'll get a notice of collection, you'll get all these things, you'll think, which one is the reassessment? And so in the last 5 or 6 years, CRA has tried to kind of revamp the way it's sending out documentation.
Yeah.
And I mean, really, you are literally looking for a document that says across the top, notice of reassessment. Like, they're not hiding it. You don't have to go looking for it. If the document doesn't say that, it's not a reassessment.
Okay.
And then you're looking for a date, and the date is going to be up in the top right-hand corner. I think that's where they're still putting it at this point. It's not the date you received it, which is sometimes trips people up. It's the date that's on the corner of that document. So if it took 2 months to get to you, too bad, so sad. The key is it's whatever that date is on the top of the document. The 90-day clock starts ticking from there. And as a taxpayer, it's your obligation to keep CRA posted on where your address is. So it's not their problem to locate you.
If they can't, that's.
So there's lots of cases where someone moved, forgot to change their address, the reassessment went floating about, missed the 90 days. There is an ability to get a brief extension, but you just don't want to go there. Like, just let CRA know where you are. I know people don't want to let them know where they are, but just change your address. It will make sure at least that you get stuff. Or if you're doing things online, actually pop into your online account every now and then with CRA.
Yes.
Just see if there's something
Yes.
new. Keep an eye out.
Yes, that is a good takeaway for today, I think. Like, if you took anything away, to be proactive, you can pop into your CRA account, see if they've sent you anything, check out, maybe you've been assessed and you don't know what that means, read the letter.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's always good to like get awareness around these things, even if there's no action you need to take. It's like, you want to get used to the language and what they send you, so that it'll be less scary if they do send you something from an audit, and then you just come watch this video and you say, look how cool and chill I am right now, because I listened to Amanda.
It's simple. You just gotta take some deep breaths. It'll be okay.
So really, it's like, be aware of what you're sending them, and keeping things that need to be confidential, hiring help when you see that it's potentially over your head, asking a ton of questions, controlling the information that's going back and forth. Was there, I feel like
well, the other one I guess we didn't talk about, but it maybe is a very quick one to add in, is make good on your promises. So if you tell CRA, I'm going to give you these documents by Friday, and you don't give them on Friday, like, there's a note that goes in your file.
Oh, this is
and you become that person that doesn't meet deadlines. Now, sometimes we can't meet the deadline. We get sick. The document we're looking for doesn't come in. that's okay. You just need to pick up the phone that day and say, okay, here's the problem. I was going to get you this by today. I can't because of X, Y, and Z. Can I get it to you by Monday? That's okay. But don't let the deadline pass, because when you start making promises that you don't keep, and that goes for any interaction, whether it's collections, audit, appeals, you will lose credibility very fast, and it does get attached to your name. Like I've seen that go through the system, and it's very hard to come back from that.
That is like such a good tip. And it's something that I saw with collections a lot. I used to tell my clients they couldn't pay their bill. I'm like, you gotta call them and tell them. It's not like when you call them, all of a sudden they're gonna like reach into your bank account.
In fact, if you
through
don't
the
call
phone.
them, they
Yeah,
will.
that's exactly it. Right? This is exactly it. It's like
Exactly.
calling them. I think it's just know that, you know, if they ask you for something that you don't understand, you can ask for it in writing. The best thing you can do, like, you don't have to answer questions on the spot. And like, you can always call them and ask for clarification and communicate what's going on. That's not going to cause you harm by doing that. But yeah, well, we're wishing that nobody gets audited, but if you do,
these are your tips.
These are your tips. Do your bookkeeping.
That's right.
And okay, how can people find you? Where's the best place to connect with the tax chick?
So as we're recording this, I'm in the process of revamping my website. So eventually I will have a new website. But right now, the best way to connect with me is on Instagram. I'm at tax.chick. And in the link in my bio, it gives you the link to my podcast, my blog, my new website will be up there, and all the other resources I have. I'm also on LinkedIn. So if you Google Amanda Doucette on LinkedIn, you can connect with me there. And my podcast is available on all major streaming platforms. It's called the Tax Chick Podcast, and I really encourage you to check it out.
Yes, and there's a really good episode on incorporation. There's two, I think.
There's two on incorporation.
And I think that's a hot topic for people, especially this time of year, because it's early in the year. You're thinking, should I incorporate? What should I do this year? Her episodes on it are really, really great. So I highly recommend.
Oh, well, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for watching, and have a beautiful day.